Dr. Peter Smith, the Chief Education Officer of the Ministry of Education, Keith Laban, who is an I.C.T. educator at the Ministry of Education, Pandit Shiva Maharaj, education technologist and founder, director and chief operating officer at I.C.T. Expertz Limited, Dev Gosine, who introduced me just now. He is the chair-elect of the TTMAG and founder of WeXL.Online. Dr. Andrea Kanneh, she's a manager performance and engagement, the digital skills unit in the Ministry of Digital Transformation. And Dr. Keith Nurse, president, College of Science, Technology and Applied Arts of Trinidad and Tobago. This is going to be more of a conversation, but because Dr. Nurse has to leave early and Dr. Smith is not available and he's going to be doing a video presentation, we'll start with Dr. Nurse and he will give a short presentation and we'll deal with those questions as we move along. So Dr. Nurse, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. It's a huge pleasure to be participating in this session. I think this panel is hitting on a very important issue, which impacts a large share of our populations, not just here in the Caribbean, but worldwide. In fact, I would dare say, as you indicated, the pandemic had a huge impact on how we dealt with the issue of education, and it proved to be one of the biggest challenges for most countries. How do you manage in a COVID context? I'm trying to see if I can pull up my files, my presentation. I'm not seeing it on my screen. Oh dear. All right. Well, I'll speak to the topic. When I was invited to participate in this panel, the first thing that struck me was that we were narrowing the issue to one, ICTs, and two, it seems to be a focus on the learning environment. I would dare argue that we should be talking about digital transformation in the broadest sense of things, and also that we should be talking about how IC technologies and digital technologies more broadly are utilized outside of the classroom within the educational context, because they do have a telling impact on how our educational institutions are run and managed. So in that regard, I have three things that I wanted to get across. The first is that we need to be looking at the broad range of digital technologies as they apply. So that's everything from the Internet of Things to the role of social media, to the ways in which virtual reality is going to become a really big component of the educational landscape, and the list goes on. In fact, I think I'm speaking to the converted. And in fact, many of you who are participating in this probably have a better handle on these digital technologies than I do. My training is really...
Dr. Nurse, if you wish, would you like me to present for you?
Yeah, if you could pull it up.
I do. I have it up. I have it ready to present. So I'll present it now.
Okay.
All right, you can go ahead. It's presenting as we speak.
Okay, right. So if you could flip to the first page. Thank you. Yeah. So I think the key point that I want to make is this. The educational sector as a sector is really scripted in a 19th century framework based on a mass education approach. And that model is premised on a sort of like a cookie cutter model, which is it's supply driven, and it's focused on providing generic and generalizable education across the board. That model has served its usefulness, And in fact, it has outlived its usefulness now, because we do recognize increasingly that people learn differently, and that we need to adapt the education system to the demands of the learners rather than the other way around. And in that regard, I think the digital transformation process enables us to create and to have a curated, customized learning experience or experiences and environments that are both adaptive to technological change, but also for stakeholder interests. And in that sense, we're talking about learners, educators, employers, funders, governments, and the list go on, right? And so the technologies of today provide for this framework to be executed. It would have been far more difficult in the past, but we have the technologies to deliver on this increasingly now. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, there are two key areas, I think, where there are key benefits. One is in the learning experience and the learning environment. So yes, digital transformation allows for teaching, learning, and education to be delivered online in very much an experiential way. And where we're doing it on demand through time and space. So for example, during the pandemic, many universities were offering programs where their students were in multiple time zones and multiple geographies. So they could be accessing from home, from school, from the office, on their mobile devices, wherever. But this is going to become even more of an issue going forward, as use of AI and things like teaching assistants and chatbots and so on become more prominent in the landscape. In fact, the search engine technologies have been advancing quite rapidly. And so we are going to be seeing a mechanism by which even research and publication and so on are going to become even more dynamic. But it is also that the digital technologies can be used not just in the classroom, but it can also be used in workspaces and other learning environments. For example, maker spaces, where we facilitate learning by doing. Too much of our teaching happens within the confines of four walls or on a screen, when in fact the higher rate of learning comes from learning by doing. So 3D printers, robotics, virtual reality, new media, and so on are all going to be the technologies that we can use to create this learning by doing context. And in the same vein, animation for education and gamification of knowledge, again, where the digital tools allow for our students to learn in a more dynamic environment rather than the static model that has dominated since the 19th century. Next slide, please. The other issue that I am arguing is that if you look at the ways in which higher education in particular is managed, technologies and data management services facilitated by digitalization are really important. Whether you're talking about managing your human resources, because in the education sector, its biggest expenditure is on human resources. And in fact, it is the human resources that makes the education system work. It's the lecturers, it's the academics, supported by administrators. So managing your facilities, because the technologies that we are using have to have a place of residence. And so you have to have facilities that are equipped to use these technologies. And then there's technologies management more broadly. But one of the things that was really striking about the pandemic context is that there is a digital divide, but there's also a divide in relation to who, for example, has access to e-commerce tools. So for example, telecoms and payment systems became even more prominent during the COVID context, where people couldn't physically go somewhere to pay, for example, to pay to register for a course or to pay for their fees, etc. And so these digital techniques are also critical. And then there's cyber tech and cyber security issues. Of course, these are critical areas, and it's becoming even more important in the academic realm. And then there are blockchain technologies, that manage all the logistics, but also can facilitate verifiable digital certificates, which are going to become even more prominent as we proceed. And last but not least is the communications and social media technologies, which we use for marketing. What good is it to have a great program and nobody knows about it? And so these are the means by which the digital transformation process are impacting on particularly higher education, but I would dare say all levels of education, whether you're talking about secondary schools, primary schools, early childhood, and also particularly vocational areas of training. I'll end on that note. I know I don't have much time, and I apologize for not being able to stay on for the whole session this morning, but I'll try and catch up with the tape version of this as we proceed. Thank you very much. All the best to you.
Thank you, Dr. Nurse. Do you have 2 minutes to talk about something that you had brought up with us previously, which is the economic benefit of educational content creation in the Caribbean? Because that's something that you work on a lot, and I've not seen much discussion about that.
Okay. Yes. If you look at the data for the education sector, from a trade standpoint, the Caribbean is a major importer of content from North America and Europe in particular. Just if you look at the data on book imports, it runs into the hundreds of millions in the region. I mean, just Jamaica alone is close to $100 million US in imports. Trinidad and Tobago is close to $60 million US. So these are sizable markets. The question that arises now is, can we use the digital techniques to produce indigenous or culturally relevant content and have it within our schools systems, but also then export it to other regions? So for example, issues relating to small island developing states, or issues relating to populations that are Afro-descendant or Indo-descendant. There is a niche that is globally available to us. And if we utilize animation, gamification, and so on, we could well export those outputs, digitally generated outputs, globally. And so we are no longer restricted to the domestic market or the regional market, which are really shrinking. If you look at the demographics for the Caribbean, particularly the English-speaking Caribbean, our population is not only aging, it's also shrinking. So by 2050, there will be 1 million less people in the English-speaking Caribbean. And that market means that our educational establishment as currently configured will become completely unsustainable, because we'll have more plant, we have learners or a market. And so this is really a critical issue that you've just asked me to jump in on. Thank you very much for that, Jacqueline.
Thank you. Okay, what I'd like to do is go through some of the questions that we have, and then show the video of Dr. Smith, if that's okay with the technical people. Yeah? Okay, so my first question is, during the pandemic, I.C.T was vital to enabling education during lockdown, but it seems as if a lot of people were just using it as a stopgap and they're ready to dive back into the face-to-face. And there's a widely held opinion that online education is lesser somehow than face-to-face. What do you think about what happened in the pandemic? Was that really online education? Is it fair to judge I.C.T-enabled online education, hybrid education, by what happened in the pandemic? So you want to start with, well, Dr. Nurse, if you have any comments before I know you have to leave.
Yeah, so I'll make one quick comment and then I'll jump off. So yes, most of what was offered during the pandemic period was remote emergency online learning. We were really scrambling to pull it all together. What I think has happened is that now things are a lot more settled. We've trained a lot of our educators, and also our student base has now come to appreciate the value of online education. It has its strengths and it has its weaknesses, like in any other format. The key strength, though, is that it offers people to learn wherever, whenever, and able to access the content on demand, meaning that they can access it late at night, they could look at it 10 times, whereas in a face-to-face environment, you either get it that one time or you didn't, all right? And so what we need to be doing is finding the way, what I call the sweet spot. What's the sweet spot for online digital education? And what's the sweet spot for face-to-face? So face-to-face is effective if it's in a workshop, if it's learning by doing, etc. But if it's purely theoretical, where you are just, a teacher is just in front of the classroom, a lot of that can be better enabled digitally. And so we already know that people learn only about 25-30% of what they hear in the classroom. So it's very inefficient. And we already know that they learn closer to 80% of what they do. And so learning by doing is where the real growth in educational performance is to happen. So COVID or no COVID, all right, the train has left the station, and we won't be returning to the good old days because it's far less effective. And so we should be thinking of what is the right mix. It's not either or, either or. It's really what is the right mix and what is sweet spot. Where is it most effective? So I'll leave you on that note, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate. All the best to you all, and best to the panelists. Okay, bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. So Dev, what do you think? You were principal at Naparima. Could you give us your opinion on what happened then and what's going on now?
Okay, thanks, Jacqueline, and good morning again, everyone. I know I did not introduce myself earlier, and thanks to Jacqueline, she did. That Gosine, director, TTMAG. And I think Keith is very correct, and I love that open question, Jacqueline. What we had when the Prime Minister announced the closure of schools on the 15th of March 2020, come the 16th of March, which is a Monday, 2020, what we had was a crazy knee-jerk reaction to the closure of schools, okay? Unfortunately, a lot of people in education and ICT and whatnot, this is not in any way alluding anything negative to our hardworking teachers and whatnot in the country. But a lot of people say, I got this. Meaning, I have a laptop, I know where the power button is, I know how to turn it on, I have Word, I may not use Excel, so I could teach online, okay? I've been an educator for the last 4 decades. Nothing is further from the truth, So, when you look at, the situation, and I'm going to leave room for ventilation by the other speakers as well. A simple thing. Everyone on this call drives. We all drive a vehicle. But when we go on the road, there are rules that we follow when we are on the road. And we all follow those rules. So we are safe on the road. Were there any rules or directives given to every educator from whoever? Okay. And I didn't want to say the school that I was from. One of the first things we did was establish an online school protocol that guided parents, teachers, and students. And that was shared, it was on the website, it was everything, And I think that's where we started from. But I'll stop there because I would like other participants to chime in on this very important topic about the relevance of it. And I see Tracy asked a very nice question in the chat as well, which is, why is there so much hate towards this online thing? So I would just ventilate that, one of the things that we needed to do were rules. And up to now, I don't think I saw any. I don't know if I missed it, but I'll pass it back to you, Jacqueline, for ventilation by the other, to chime in on the conversation by the other panelists.
Absolutely. Keith, you're an educator as well. Can you give us your experiences and what you thought about what went on then?
Yes. Morning, everyone. So yeah, it was very interesting because for me, I've been a I.C.T educator for a while, all right, and a teacher trainer for a while also, like over 10 years as a teacher trainer. So I remember in the early days, we teacher development, through teacher development, we used to do a lot of training on summertime, and anytime there's a vacation for teachers, give them a little certificate on I.C.T in education. And then they developed a system, a kind of during the term system, where we were teaching teachers the UNESCO I.C.T competency for teachers at level 2. And I remember during some of those sessions, that's pre-pandemic, teachers would say to me, sir, this is real nice and everything, but we'll never use these kind of tools because Monday morning I'm going back into my classroom, I'm going on my board, but this is nice though, nice to know. All right, and then the pandemic came, and I remember I got getting messages from some teachers saying, so, we really appreciate how we went through some of these things, learning how to use learning management systems, how to do certain things online, doing online assessments. So for some teachers who were prepared, it really helped them out. Some of the initial training, the training did not span a large area. In fact, it was mostly concentrated within the secondary school area, secondary school teachers. And for those, some were prepared. So when you see that COVID hit, some teachers, like, for example, in my school in Trinity East, some teachers who were using Edmodo, platform no longer around now, but by the Monday morning were online with their students, didn't lose any time at all. But then again, in other schools, I know some teachers, they just didn't know how to get it together, and they ended up, some probably even didn't rejoin till the following academic year, so it was interesting. I think a lot of teachers, especially the ones who weren't prepared at all, they were the ones who had the negative feedback about, this online thing, I can't do it. How am I doing this thing? Ministry not giving me equipment. I don't have a laptop. All right. But those who were prepared, I think they had a good experience with it. So the thing is, we have to ensure that in the future, we can make more people prepared first. That's just my view.
So your main thing is we needed the human resources to be able to do this properly.
Yeah.
Shiva, you want to give us your thoughts?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Sure. As an educator myself, and comparing pre and post pandemic, I think many of the issues or the real issues when it comes down to quality education are much like the same. And I say so for the example of when we are a teacher, you go through teacher education, you always learn that you must never be the sage on the stage. I know some educators would know that term, the sage on the stage, where, you just stand in front of the class and disseminate information. And we saw with the pandemic, a lot of teachers just replacing the sage on the stage using the technology, especially with the synchronous and so forth, where they just come on and they disseminate. But in the real thing that we are supposed to do as educators is to make it more interactive. And so by so doing, we need our teachers, we see there's a need for our teachers especially to be well trained, and there's a difference in training and education, which we may expand on later, trained in the use of tools, not only the digital tools, but also their teaching tools in class as well. No formal training actually goes on in that for them, how to use their tools to make their classes more engaging, which is the real key to any quality education. That's all I'll say for now, and we'll develop as we go along.
Great. Andrea, you are not in the traditional education schools-based learning. You're working more with the general public and getting them trained digitally. And as Shiva was talking about the difference between school education in schools and training. What do you think?
Okay, well, thanks for inviting me here as a member of the Ministry of Digital Transformation. I've been an educator for over 20 years, so now I'm sitting on the other side.
Mhm.
I just want to give a quick background about our ministry because it's relatively new. We started in 2021, July 2021, and the pandemic sort of showed or forced the issue why it was so important to create a ministry like this, right? Now, our mandate is to address the end-to-end consumption and delivery of goods and services to customers using appropriate digital technology. So you're correct. We're not just looking at teachers or students or administrators. We're looking at the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago. We have three arms of this government. We have digital society, digital economy, and digital government. I sit in digital society. My specific focus is digital skills. And what we're doing is developing citizens so they are capable participants as well as future contributors to the economy and to Trinidad and Tobago. With respect to the change to the online environment, it was reactionary at that point in time because of the pandemic. But what we are doing is building capacity. We are a partnering ministry. So we're working with institutions to build their capacity. So if we have to go with the blended approach or the hybrid approach or purely online, we're ready for it. Not just the people within the schools, but the citizens in general. So a grandparent could help a child with homework, or parent could help their children, right? So what we're doing is equipping everyone, upskilling, as well as creating creators so that we could build the needs of this nation or this country.
So when you talk about creating creators, that goes back to Dr. Nussa's point about building content and using that as possibly a new revenue stream for the country.
Exactly.
So education is no longer just the second largest expenditure in the budget, but it's more of it balances more. It's more of an income generator as well.
Right. So that we could actually contribute to the GDP of the country. So what we're doing is looking at developers, looking at the citizen who needs the basic literacy skills, but we also sort of enhancing the skills of our developers and showing them that, it's not just about doing the work that you're doing, but you could actually create content. You could design solutions for the country. You could design it regionally, internationally. And what we want to do is get our people focused and ready to contribute.
Great, thank you. Following up on that, we've talked about online education. Some of us have already started talking about the value of ICT in education, especially online learning. But are there benefits to different ways of online learning versus face-to-face? Because, we've got online, we've got hybrid, we've got self-paced, synchronous, asynchronous. There's so many ways to do online learning. And as Tracy had said in the chat, there's a lot of hate for it. And do you see any ways that are better, more applicable in certain areas that you work in? And also, are there negatives? I know who would like to start. You want to start with Shiva? Do you want to go first this time?
Sure, no problem. So if we are looking at, we're looking at the way forward here, as we're looking at the future, we have to understand that when it comes to technology, the only constant is change, because technology is evolving constantly. And when we look at education, we have to find ways to include that sort of education with regards to technology to be embedded in our education system, so that we will be creating, as Andrea highlighted there, the citizens of tomorrow will be these digital citizens. But at the moment, we have to find ways, just as other parts of the world are including these things like digital citizenship and digital literacy. They are embedding it in their education system from as early as the primary, straight up, right? So that by the end of it, they would, and I know I recently had the opportunity of working with Cambridge, with the Cambridge Primary computing, and last year we completed 6 series of books. And we not only did books for children, workbooks, we also did teacher guides, because we knew for a fact that around the world, not every teacher would have the skills to implement or to teach the computing to students. And so we that was catered for. And so I think we need to look at some of these things when we want to future-proof in including this type of training from a very early age, so that we will be producing those digitally competent citizens of tomorrow.
Great. Dev, you have I remember you talking about some practical experiences that you've had about these. You want to share those with us?
Yeah, sure. I like to use little anecdotes,
Mm-hmm.
How many of us had our phone dropped in some water? And what do we do? What do we do? The first thing we do is that we go to the University of YouTube and we learn. Okay? They never taught us that in school. They never taught us that in university. The point I'm making is that I see one of the roles of our traditional schools is not just to impart information, but the schools must create that passion to learn. Must create, we are not the educators, are not the end all, it's not the repository of all information. If you think you are, then you have just put yourself a notch above the internet. You have just said that I am smarter than the internet. Why not train our students to use the available tools? Infuse that passion to want to learn. I remember I had a conversation with I was actually going for an interview for the role of leadership in the school, Teaching Service Commission. And they asked me, the first question was, Mr. Gosine, what is your vision for education? And I said, that's a very, very interesting question. But before I answer, I want to ask you all a rhetorical question. Who says that students must go to school at 8 a.m. and leave at 2:30 p.m.? Is it one of you all on this panel? Is it some technocrat who was in the Ministry of Education 20 years ago? Is it the Minister of Education, or was it God? Okay. The fact is that I believe that learning could take place anywhere and anytime. And this is the thrust of I.C.T, of future-proofing our I.C.T in education. We have to infuse that passion. And Tracy asked a nice question, why is there so much hate? We have to show people out there, educators and students alike, that listen, I.C.T is our friend. I.C.T is a tool that we use all the time. Your phone drop in water, use I.C.T to solve the problem. Okay, so this is just the practical approach that I would suggest that we use. Just to give you a little backdrop, to answer your question in the context that you asked, Jacqueline. In 2015, we had converted. I was leading a team to transform Naparima College into a smart school. We have Wi-Fi throughout. We have redundancy in the internet. We have redundancy and so on. So when the pandemic hit, in 2020, we were ready. We had LMSs, we had teachers were trained, students were trained to use it. You already had the ID numbers and all that sort of stuff. But the fact of the matter is that, again, we're in this trust of infusing that passion to want to learn. And I think I see Talia's hand up, so I'll give it to her. Jacqueline, over to you.
Sure. Talia, you have a question?
More of a comment. Across the board, in all aspects of civil society work, we have recognized the Ministry of Education is not being transformative. And we need to act on that, because more and more I hear from teachers other nonprofits that try to go into these schools, even advancing the infrastructure of the school to allow for better use of digital tools. It is very, how to put this? I wouldn't say selective, but it's, it's more of if the school has the autonomy to do it through, if it's a denominational school, or they have a more, they have access to more funding than anything that the ministry is budgeting for. So the transformation has to happen from the leadership of the MOE, and that seems to be stagnated. And there are a number of incidents I hear about at plenty schools. One is at Brazil High School, where, the I.C.T. Person at the school was doing stuff on their own, and then they get moved around, and something is happening. Something is happening in our Ministry of Education level, where because they are difficult to change and move, the effect is now our students are being left behind in the whole digital transformation. And it's not fair that some schools may have the ability to do it just because of other types of resources that they have access to. So we need new leadership at the MOE.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Dr. Smith isn't here to respond to that, but he does bring up some of those points in his presentation, which we'll get to just a bit. Keith, a lot of people have spoken about the need for teacher education. And as a teacher educator yourself, let's get your perspective on that.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, so teacher education definitely important, because as I said before, a lot of teachers were really apprehensive, real apprehensive to use online tools. And even those that started to use it, they were using it at the mere substitution level. So those who know about I.C.T. in education or studied it a bit would know that okay, the lowest level would be the stage of substitution, and well, that's good. It's still a place to start. So instead of a teacher using the that was accustomed to going to a blackboard and writing out some notes, they would now project a PowerPoint on the board and use it to flip through some notes. All right, so just substituting the tools, but still it's still a start. But definitely for true I.C.T. integration, you just don't want the substitution. You want to incorporate higher order learning and so forth. So definitely, with respect to achieve that with students, we definitely need some teacher education, especially into the different models. Because not just the chalk and talk pedagogical model, you want the model where, like, for example, project-based learning, where students could go now and create a little animation, create a comic, do something using I.C.T. and some kind of I.C.T. tool, make a video, make an animation. And that's the kind of level that, you would like to get at. So in addition to being more exciting for the students and less classroom management, a teacher would realize that they would have a lot less issues in the classroom by using such exciting tools. But the overall outcome with respect to getting higher order learning there, rather than just knowledge or remembering something, being able to apply the knowledge, you'll be able to do that using I.C.T. So definitely that's the area where we need to get into, not just merely, well, granted that some teachers also need to know how to actually use a computer, and we need to, unfortunately, we need to span it. We need to span it from that level right up to the level of the competent teacher to be able to use some form of advanced tools.
So do we think, and I'll ask you, Shiva, to come in after Keith, do you think that we need to overhaul the teacher training aspect that we're doing? Because we've got teacher training, teacher education, bachelor's in education at UTT, University of the Southern Caribbean, UE, across the board. We've got a lot of education and training for teachers, but somehow this isn't happening in the schools? Do you
Well-
think we need to overhaul the training and make sure that it's more future focused?
Well, I've seen some of the courses and so forth in some of these training in these degrees and postgraduate programs and so forth. And they are trying to infuse the ICT. I should add that possibly we could upgrade it, take it a notch or two to use much more advanced stuff and. But I think the major setback why you will see it, okay, they would do it in the PED, but then they wouldn't be able to do it in school. We have some big infrastructure issues. So I know the PED teachers would go and they would do some nice stuff. And some might even bring their router from home to do the teacher demonstration when they're doing their PED. All right. But when it's time to apply it in schools, they're just not getting to because the Wi-Fi not reaching on the block. The Wi-Fi not strong enough. All the students go on it crashing. So there are a lot of infrastructural issues that would prevent the proper execution of these tools.
Shiva, you taught or teach EdTech in teacher education, education technology. What do you think? Are the classes suitable for purpose?
Right.
Do they really bring them to the point of being able to choose and determine what we're going to do online to help the students learn better and easier?
All right, so I could speak on this point from both a student's perspective, because I was one of the first batches for the bachelor's in education at UTT, as well as being a teacher educator at UTT as well. So when as a student, we only had one educational technology course out of the many, right? And that was just like a basic introduction to educational technology and the uses of it. So I actually lecture at the master's level where there's a full-blown educational technology master's. And one of the things coming out of the pandemic, actually, some of my students from the cohorts, they actually started reaching out to me because I taught internet technology development, which is exactly hands-on how to use the internet technologies to teach. And they reached out to me to say, we are so grateful for having done that master's and for having done choosing that particular path, which included the internet technology development, because it really assisted them. This is why I said it, and this is from the education aspect of it. However, as Keith just highlighted, and Dev also highlights from time to time, a lot of training in the actual technical aspects needs to be done with these teachers as well, because I remember Dev in our meeting before made the example of knowing how far you are from your router or where to place your router in your house. These are simple things that can make a big difference with the impact. So we have to look at both. That's why I say we have to look both at the education, which will prepare you to continue learning, and the training for the specific implementations that we need to have. So we definitely need to rehaul the teacher education aspects of it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Let me just ask for I think this would be a good time to get the presentation from Dr. Smith, if that's possible.
Can I say one thing before
Sure,
the presentation? Yeah,
Right
I want to
ahead.
just chime in on the question of the approach to education. If we're going to go purely online, if you're going to go with a hybrid, what is the best approach? And each learner is so different that we have to cater for the face-to-face. We have to cater for like a meet and greet. So something that we're doing at the ministry, yes, we are looking at partnering with others for the learning management system, but we also have access centers where the public could go into an access center. They sprinkle throughout the different communities in Trinidad, and they will sit with you to show you how to access your information. They will show you how to probably do resumes and print. So the future proofing is not just about preparing the technology and having people find a way to use it. We're going to show you how as well. We're going to do some hand holding so that people will be better able to support their own, their family, or students could go in and ask questions. Right? We also partner with people like NIHUS, or YTEP, that have innovation spaces. And that is part of the learning that you mentioned. Sometimes we have to do, not just read.
Absolutely. There are a lot of different ways of learning. So thank you.
I am Dr. Peter Smith, Chief Education Officer of the Ministry of Education. I will be presenting on the challenges in sustaining the use and application of ICT in education and possible solutions. The last 2 years have been a testament to the importance of technology in education, particularly during the height of the pandemic. The sudden shift to online learning highlighted both the opportunities and challenges of using ICT in education in Trinidad and Tobago. It emphasized the need for technology to be readily accessible and for teachers to be equipped with the necessary skills to effectively utilize technology in the classroom. We are now entering the fourth industrial revolution. The technology is rapidly advancing and changing the way we live, work, and communicate. Thus, it is crucial that we invest in ICT to ensure that our students are prepared for the future workforce. To make this happen, we need to take several steps. 1, bridge the digital divide. This means providing devices and internet access to students who do not have access to these resources. This digital divide exacerbates existing inequalities and puts students at a disadvantage when it comes to the education and future opportunities. This is why the ministry is committed to bridging this divide by investing in infrastructure and resources to ensure all students have access to the internet and technology they need to succeed. This can be achieved through public-private partnerships and government initiatives, such as providing subsidies for internet access and technology for low-income families. 2, provide teachers with training and support. This includes providing professional development opportunities, access to digital resources, and tools and ongoing support from technology experts. The ministry has continued to provide training and resources for teachers with a specific focus on ICT in education. 3, invest in necessary infrastructure and support. This includes investing in high-speed internet, upgrading hardware and software, and providing technical support for both students and teachers. This is particularly essential in rural and remote areas where connectivity is limited. Additionally, it also means continuing to resource head and educational district offices of the Ministry of Education. 4, emphasis on digital literacy. Digital literacy is a key component in the integration of ICT. It includes the ability to use and understand digital technology, including the internet, social media, and other digital tools. It is essential to empower students, teachers, and parents, and other employees of the Ministry of Education with the knowledge and skills to be able to use technology effectively in their daily lives. 5, addressing cybersecurity. With the increasing use of technology in education, it's important to consider the cybersecurity risks and threats that come with it. This includes ensuring the security and privacy of student data, protecting it against hacking and phishing attempts, and educating students on safe and responsible online behavior. This requires collaboration between government, private sector, and schools to implement policies and protocols that ensure the security of education and its users. In conclusion, the integration of ICT in education presents many opportunities and challenges. But with the right investments, training, and support, we can ensure that our students are well equipped to succeed in a digital world. Thank you very much.
Great. So Dr. Smith brought up some of the things that people have been talking about with regard to lack of infrastructure and so forth. And I know that there are many, many projects, some with the Ministry of Digital Transformation, some with the Ministry of Education, some different ministries all over the place as part of this across the board journey into digital transformation for Trinidad and Tobago. But now you know pretty much where we are. Yes, there is a lack of a lot of things that will allow us all to participate on a fair and equal level in digital education and training and benefiting from the digital society. But assuming that we got those sorted, what do you think? What is your vision or your preferred vision of the future of education in Trinidad and Tobago, education and training? What do you think it'll look like? Andrea, do you want to start this time?
Okay, sure. Yeah. I see like all levels participating in your education and training. So training is not just the textbook words, but bringing it to light. So having young students using basic programming languages from, the start, not just when it's time for like CSEC or CAPE. It will be a new language that we're going to be speaking, and everyone is going to be included. So you have the people who are actually in the educational stream and the people looking on in terms of the citizens who are not going through some sort of formal education. They too will be able to participate. The good thing about the ministry is that we partner. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel or have our own thing, because you mentioned a whole set of ministries doing different things. What we're looking at is creating a platform that is integrated, where we could support other people in terms of their ideas and in terms of, getting everyone on board. So I see the future where we all participating in some way or the other. Yes, some will be consuming in terms of learning how to use the systems, because right now the hate that people are speaking about in the chat, a lot of that is fear-based. So getting people on board to participate, and then for sure we create. We're not just going to be consuming other people's technology, we create. Dr. Nurse mentioned that indigenous software and programs that represent us, we could create that, as well as we could create for a global society.
Thanks, Andrea. Shiva, I saw you were giving a thumbs up on the idea of coding from early, and I know that you got
definitely.
that project in with Cambridge.
Yes.
Starts, I think, with coding at kindergarten level.
Kindergarten level straight up. And, when we look at what the skills that we want to teach for lifelong learning, right? Because that should be the goal of education. In teaching, with kids, you're teaching, let's use Scratch, which is a graphic-based programming platform. To move something from one corner to a next corner, you're teaching in that creativity, critical thinking, and all these sorts of things come out just by giving them this problem and getting them to do so. But, I also want to mention that we hear a lot of it being blamed on the lack of infrastructure. And I would like to disagree with that, because I don't know if Dev Tilak Singh is on here, but if he remembered, 20 years ago, we did something, computers in school, where we took, computers that were discarded, and we took Linux terminal server and we set it up in schools, and we had caching of websites on a local server that was used. Like 20 years ago, we talked about when we had dial-up internet. We downloaded websites onto a local server and had kids come in and just the experience of getting online and surfing without internet. So we can't blame infrastructure for everything. Yes, a lot more can be accomplished if we have the proper infrastructure, like the bandwidth and so on, for the video content and all that. But there's a lot that we could do with the resources or the situations that we do have. So that's one point I want to make, that we should never, a good educator or a well-trained educator put in a classroom would be able to use, as in normal teaching, whatever resources they have to really meet their students. And I think that is a skill that we should try to, like, for example, making a chart. When we are teacher educators, they tell you make charts to teach a lesson, but nobody went and sit down with you and tell you, well, you have to border the chart and you have to write in a certain way, or, nobody taught you that. So these are the kinds of things that we need to maybe pay more attention to make sure we get it right, or the way that we want it, to have these sorts of training to supplement the education of our educators.
And Dev, do you want to weigh in now? You need to unmute. You're muted.
Yeah, I just said I'll just type it up something else. Just skip me for a minute. I'll come back after the next person.
No problem. Keith?
Thanks. Sorry, Jacqueline.
Keith?
Okay, yes. So I would go back to training, and I would heavily go on infrastructure. I would continue to harp on infrastructure, because I'm telling you, it's not a guess, I am involved with teachers in many low performance schools, and I'm telling you, when you don't have a plug that is working, you don't have electrical connection, right? And you don't have lights that working, far more for Wi-Fi, no matter how good the training is, you could have you could take how many old computers you want or whatever it is. I would still say you need to have the training, all right? Because we need to have the teachers trained and be able to use the tools and be able to get excited about it. But it's like trying to hammer a nail with your hand, it's even though how creative the teacher could be, there's just the point, you would reach a point where, okay, look, I need internet, I need some electricity to power my systems, I need some form of infrastructure. And you're telling me no infrastructure, that will just turn off teachers at the get-go. All right. And I've seen that, and I know that for a fact. All right, it's not a guess. I know of the challenges of the infrastructure. So that's just what I have to say.
Dev?
All right, yes. Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, actually, my thought was elsewhere. So sorry about that. Okay, two things I want to touch on. And it's a good thing Keith came in just before me, because infrastructure, I understand that is very necessary. But as an educator, you realize that there are the haves and the have-nots, okay? There are the haves who have the best infrastructure and they can stay connected and whatnot. But the geography of Trinidad and Tobago sometimes does not allow everybody that level of connectivity. And, I'll just preface what I'm saying. So I'm teaching a class, and I realize a certain student is dropping out frequently. So the first thing I do, I go through a technical program with all my students about, Wi-Fi and all this kind of nice stuff. I said, do a speed test somewhere and private message me on the chat. And you will see, listen to this, 120 kilobytes per second, not mega, kilo, And then it dawns on me that, some of these places, the connectivity is low or whatever. So I decided, I said, so why don't you go to some other service? They said, well, we don't have that here where I live. This is all we have. And then I realized that my role is not just to educate. So I have gone to some of the providers, and let me state abundantly clear that I get no remuneration for making these comments. But there's one company that first impressed me, a company called Airlink, that actually offered a student plan for 120 TT a month. Okay. And then I haven't taught quite a few of the big ups in Digicel. I had a meeting with Digicel as well. And I said, listen, you know, I was reading a business survey and they were analyzing companies that really made it through COVID-19. And they realized that there were two characteristics of these companies that caused them to survive the pandemic. One is agility, or I should say creativity, and two is agility. I say you all have students suffering for internet. Nobody in your organization ever thought it wise to come up with a plan for students. Well, fortunately, within a month or a month and a half, they responded with a student plan. At $100 or $99, the student has access. And what is the nice thing about it is that all the online learning platforms, Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, they're all 0 rated. So you get 2 gigs of data per day, but if you're on Zoom for the whole day, you will end up with your 2 gigs of data. It's not drawn down. So this is the kind of things that you have to do as educators. Try to rally for the people who sometimes don't have a voice to rally for. I had 2 points, that was the first one, but I talked too much on this one. So I think I have to come back on this one. Oh yes, I just remembered. On the chat, there's a lot of information about ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. So I think we need to probably look at that, and it's something that we need to address as educators. Are we going to be replaced in the future?
Actually,
Jacqueline?
yeah.
What do you, Jacqueline?
Actually, Dev, that was where I was going to go next with regard to the use of AI and some of the fear that Andrea spoke about, because people ban things because they're not ready. They don't see the potential. For example, people are saying, oh, well, we can't mark an essay because we don't know if it was an AI that created the essay. I'm like, yeah, you can. What is the important part of writing an essay? Is it that we want people to learn the basic structure and we're checking their grammar and stuff? Or is it the thought process, the processes that they go through? Because even with AI creating the output, you can measure and evaluate the thinking process, the research process, the focus. Because say we talk about ChatGPT, you've got to ask it questions. It's still the same thing. You ask a bad question, you get a useless response from it. So the way that students can research to find out the best questions to ask and narrow down their questioning to create a really good request that will give them a good response is something that I think is far more useful. That thought process, the logic, the critical thinking of that gives you an output. But it doesn't really matter if I wrote the output or if AI wrote the output. Once AI is starting to create things, it's just another tool. So what do you guys think of that? I was wondering how we've all spoken about, when you say what we think about in the future, how far forward are you thinking? Are you thinking AI in the classroom, AI in work? Because if AI can do a lot of work for me, why should I spend my gray cells doing that? What do you all think?
I think we have to embrace it. We have to embrace it, and we have to make sure that all developers could put out things there that, that other people want to use. So in terms of the Ministry of Digital Transformation, I mean, we're not going to stop. We want to embrace.
Keith? What's your opinion?
But definitely the AI revolution is here. It's here, and it's here in a big way through ChatGPT. All right. ChatGPT, GPT 3.5 and GPT-4 gonna come out soon. That's just the start. That's just the company that that was able to jump out, as they say, immediately. All right. Google has some fascinating stuff. Fascinating. If you think ChatGPT is good and you see the fascinating stuff from Google, getting not just text-based AI, but AI going straight towards voice, AI going straight towards video avatars. All right. But because of privacy issues and all sorts of issues, and Google being a very large company, they're not, as I say, jumping out as yet. But when they come out, then you might shadow ChatGPT and say, look, this ChatGPT was just a little chatbot compared to what is out now. I currently have students who are using various image generation AI tools, like Midjourney and so forth. All right. So the students are getting their hands on it. They are using it. Don't have to tell them about it. They're using YouTube. They're getting to know about it. And it's gonna, in the early days, we used to say AI will replace the lower order jobs and so forth, AI and robotics and so forth. But now we're seeing that AI, it's fascinating, and some could say scary, to think that it actually has a train of thought that's kind of like human thinking, and it's kind of looking like it's heading in the direction of replacing higher level jobs, such as programming and all that kind of stuff that we thought that wasn't going to touch for a while. Okay. And so whether it be good or bad thought, it's here, and it's going to come even harder very soon. And we need to embrace it as educators. We need to know how we could use this tool, and we need to know which tools we could use to counteract it also. So, for example, there are ways to determine if something was written by ChatGPT. All right. And because when you have AI, you have anti-AI, right? You have AI that could be used against AI. So as educators, there are stuff that we could use to determine, rather than blanketly blocking a program or something like that. But we need to get into it ourselves, and we need to see how we could use it and how it could be used for the betterment of the students.
Shiva?
Right. So AI in conjunction with the Internet of Things and sensors and actuators, we're in big trouble, right? If we don't jump on board and have this being taught. So that is why even in that curriculum that we worked on and the books, from a very early stage, we introduce kids to these concepts and the way these things work. The whole artificial intelligence is a big chapter in many of these series. Actuators, sensors, Internet of Things, how everything is working together, how the information is being, like sometimes you all know, you just say something, and when you look at Google and things, you're seeing all the ads for it, right? So we need to educate from that level for these kids to know that these things are going on and how to use it. As simple as my Google search will be different to your Google search, because these things are all customized to your liking, or to the things that you're in looking into, and all these things we need to really bring. And I endorse the fact that we need to have it included from a very early stage. As a matter of fact, I recently heard the Prime Minister of Guyana announcing that he is going to start implementing computing from the primary school level. And so we look forward to seeing things like that here in Trinidad and the rest of the region.
Does anybody else have any comments to make? Otherwise, I'll go to a question to open the floor for questions. No? Okay. So do we have any questions from the floor? You can just put your hand up if you're in the Zoom. If you're not, okay. I've got a question here. Making the tools available and facilitating teacher education is one thing I have learned from painful experience, the issue of parental pushback. What is the strategy for their buy-in? That's from Lawrence Hines, Guyana. Who would like to take that? Andrea? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So Ministry of Education might have a strategy there, but in terms of Ministry of Digital Transformation, we're working with parents in terms of citizens. So we're working with people in general to get the buy-in. That whole psychological, barrier, that up and against technology, we're looking at basic literacy skills. We're working with YTEP to offer programs to people. So you have the hand-holding. So while we're not in the classroom per se, we are working in the background, enabling that in terms of working with the parents, the grandparents who are helping.
Okay.
Great. There is one thing that, hello? Okay. One of the things that you're talking about was the parental pushback in schools. Why do we think that happens? Is it because we have that education is something that everybody has been through, so they think that they know it well? That they know as much as the teachers? Is that something that is problematic or true?
Something that I'd like to just jump in on that. Something that I've noticed is that many persons, or we don't understand the true meaning of a competent, to be competent or competency. So a lot of people have skills. We see children, they're swiping away on a phone and we say, oh, they know computers or they know digital. But that's not all, that's just a skill. There's the knowledge and the attitude and the aptitude that has to go together with that skill to make that person competent. And we see the same thing with parents. They might say, well, I know technology, I just use my phone, but in terms of other technologies, I use the internet, I could use Google, all right, I could use YouTube, but those are just skills. There are a lot more that goes into it to make you competent. And in terms of parental thing, one example I can use here, how many parents out there know that there is parental control in your cable box? Or how many of them use that? Much more to know that there are parental controls on the devices that you could use to manage your kids. They don't. So they need to be educated, trained, not educated, but trained that these things are out there and that they can utilize them as well to manage their children, especially when it comes to, when we blame the devices for taking away time or too much time from the kids. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
I'd just like to chime in here. I had my hand raised, but I'll just lower it. Anyhow, yes. One of the things I'd mentioned at NAPS is that the very first thing that we produced really was online protocol. And to inform that protocol, we actually had contributions from the PTA, from the Past Students Association, from members of staff, and of course, guidelines from the Ministry of Education and so on. Well, in terms of, the school supervisory and so on. So we had inputs and, the mere fact that parents were able to vet some of the guidelines and some of the protocols that have been suggested. Some people just want to get buy-in, okay? And once we put the stakeholders as part of that decision-making process, that made the buy-in so much easier to implement, we gave the teachers the right, a lot of parents thought, listen, this man or this woman who is the teacher at the school come into my home during the day to teach my son. Therefore, if I want my son or my daughter to go wash wares after breakfast at 9 o'clock, then who is this man or woman to stop my child from washing wares? As an educator, because of the protocols, you have to let them know today is a school day. And between 8 and 2:30, your son is my responsibility, not yours, wherever he is. And therefore, he's not to wash wares except between 11:30 and 12:30 when we are on lunch, and you have to simply put your foot down. But we could have done that because there was a school protocol.
Great. I think there was one more question in the chat. Keith, did you have anything to say about this particular question?
Well, at the school where I teach, Trinity East kind of known as a technologically advanced school. People call it tech school. We never really had pushback from parents at all. All the parents were always supportive because they knew that their students would be going to a school that technology will be used a lot. So even though, because some teachers were doing the hybrid approach also, I myself, where you would have the Zoom or the Teams on in class, and if any students are sick or something like that and they stay home, they could still check out the class from at home. We had good support. A lot of parents said that, they would appreciate that was available and so forth. So we never really got much pushback from parents at all. In fact, no pushback. The parents really liked the use of I.C.T. and they appreciated it. So I guess it's the angle that you would come at, if in case parents looking at it as negatively as I.C.T. is a tool that, the teachers, taking the easy way out and not really teaching my child, but just trying to use something that, make their work easy, then they would be angry at using I.C.T. But then if in case they look at it as an advanced tool, being able to facilitate and collaborate with students from being at home, then they would look at it favorably.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We now have a question from Damien Boudou. Can anyone on the panel shed some light on how cybersecurity would be addressed with the move towards a more digital society? So if we started with the society and then narrowing down to the education, we start with Andrea as a society person, but whole of society person.
Right. Yeah. So again, we have 3 pillars: digital government, digital economy, and digital society. And in digital government, we actually have a deputy for cybersecurity there to ensure the safety of the transactions. In terms of digital society, where we're training people, we're going to be training everyone, educators, everyone on basics of cybersecurity. And for the developers, they're going to be receiving courses, or at least accessing courses on how to ensure or to security proof what they're creating. Now, a big part of education is awareness. And even if the parent is not in the classroom, the parent has to know. And that's where we have to make sure that the education and awareness get into those people who are supporting students, who are supporting education, so that they too know what to look for. Right? So our approach is, again, the actual infrastructure. Yes, that's part of the MDT's approach, but we're looking in terms of training in getting people like parents, grandparents aware of fraud and cybersecurity issues, and the people in the classroom, the student, the teacher, in terms of being a citizen, they're going to have access to training about how it works and what they could do in terms of their part.
Great, thank you. Dev, do you want to go next? Do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, well, it's from an online perspective. If you're looking at a school-wide, and then we're looking at a classroom situation, right? And I'll tell you what we had to implement. I mean, if you have your LMS and you have your student records and you have everything completely, let's say in a smart school, you must have proper security. You must have proper cloud storage. The whole infrastructure that you would normally use. From a teacher perspective, every teacher wants to ensure that his or her intellectual property is protected. That is important. They want to, because they spend, sometimes decades putting together their intellectual property. And some teachers would not like to put it on a shared platform, not everything on a shared platform. They like to maintain their own personality in their lesson planning and their lesson notes and so on. And all this infrastructure must be put in place. In terms of the classroom, we heard of the term Zoom bombing, and of course, Zoom responded by instituting security within your sessions, I had a very low-tech approach to cybersecurity for my classes. And all I did was simply insist that your cameras have to must be on. If I can't see you, I can't teach you. Because I like to look at your face. I could see the aha moment in your face, or pardon the language, the constipated look of ignorance on your face. Okay? So the fact is that I want to be able to see you. That's the way I could reach you. And, you know, I have had some experiences with some parents telling me this is, you know, when certain teachers come to class, my son will come and tell me, Mommy, you ready to go to the grocery now? And then the son will say, but the mommy will ask the son, but don't you have a class now? Yeah, but so Miss never really checks on me, so I could go to the grocery and come back and they wouldn't even know. Okay. So the fact of the matter is that we need to understand that there are certain things that as educators we need to put in place to secure the attention of our students. So cybersecurity is not just attacking and hacking. Okay. It's securing the teacher's own integrity, that the imparting of knowledge or education or removal of doubt happens in every session of those contact hours. You know, once you have your cameras on, nobody's going to zoom bomb your class, because nobody's going to zoom bomb a class or zoom bomb anything with their face showing. You know, so, you know, we have to look at cybersecurity at different levels in the education system. So that's my take on it, Jacqueline.
Hey, does anybody else have any comments on
sure.
this, or should I move on to the next question? Shiva,
I have a comment. Not recently, but a few years ago, I did a seminar with the Ministry of National Security, hosted by the University of Southern Caribbean. And my presentation, the title of it was Human Capital, the Weakest Link in Cybersecurity, right? Because all the research shows that the human factor is one of the weakest link in breaches in cybersecurity. So that's an important part to look at. You know, I've been doing, I'm a cyber safe trainer, certified by Logical Operations. And I've been doing that for years, doing end user cyber safe training. Because let's take, for example, a URL. People will take a popular URL like PayPal is a common one, or Amazon, and they just make little changes in the primary domain. And the untrained eye, or the person who doesn't make it a habit to check the URL and they ask for your credit card information and so on, will easily be, you know, caught with something like that. So my personal perspective has been always on the end user side of it and the human factor when it comes to cybersecurity. However, in the infrastructure as well, when we implement it into our schools, we need to also know that hopefully the administrators would know, and they have people that know, you could put in filters and so on to block unwanted content in your school. So that's from an infrastructural perspective. I don't really delve much in that. I'm more concentrated on the human side of it and making sure that everyone is trained, go through some program, so at least you know how to see these problems when they come about.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Tracy Hackshaw, our chair at TTMAG.
Thanks. Are you hearing me yet? Thanks, Jacqueline.
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yes, thanks, Jacqueline. Yeah, so my question was in the chat, but I wanted to make sure it's expanded to everyone. So, and we've touched on this, I think, throughout the discussion, digital skills, and I know Andrea has touched on it already, and others, but the question I have is really, what are we actually doing about the issue of digital skills in the country? So when I say that, I mean that we are, you know, the pandemic exposed the fact that even some people didn't know how to use email and so on, right? So let's assume we've corrected some of those challenges, the basic challenges. But it does appear to many that digital is equal to, let's say, Facebook, WhatsApp, you know, TikTok, and that kind of thing. And even content creation. When you say content creation, we're doing content on those channels. I'm trying to understand what are we actually doing, not talking. So I don't want to talk anymore. I know it's a talk shop beyond, but I want to hear what we're actually doing about moving from content consumption or let's say adjacent creation to actual creation, and what we're doing to enhance our digital skills in the country to get to that point. So for example, in education, why are we not seeing more local content for education being delivered? I mean, like, you know, and literally, I think there are a couple of teachers who are doing stuff online on YouTube, you know, lessons and so on and so forth. Great. Why are we not seeing people rewrite textbooks? There are a lot of textbook writers in Trinidad, a lucrative business. Why are we not seeing a similar thrust towards creation in the education space from the educators? Why are we not seeing our learners, adults and otherwise, using more or demanding more advanced methods of teaching or learning? And not just theory now. So I don't want to hear people saying, well, what we should do and what we should put in place. I hate the put in place talk. We should put something in place. What are we actually doing about it? Thanks.
Okay, we've got 2.5 minutes left in our time. So I'd like everybody to hit Tracy's question, but really quickly. So who wants to start? Andrea?
Okay, so things that actually happening right now, we have a partnership with YTEP where people could go in terms of computer literacy skills. So we are training 1,000 people every term. We are creating the LMS, a learning management portal, where people will access basic skills as well as the developer skills. And we have access centers where people could go in from the public and be handheld and trained on how to use the system. In terms of educational technology, part of the partnerships would be with the different ministries and helping their people to create. So we're not going to do the creation for you, but we're going to hold your hand in terms of developers within the ministries and show, like, you know, to help create content.
Andrea, you said that you were creating an LMS with, are you creating an LMS or are you using an LMS to create a learning system?
Right. So we have both happening where we're looking at one that will be integrating everyone. And right now in our pilot, we're going to have like a few that exist. We're going to give the public access to it so that they could give us feedback in terms of what you want to tweak.
So we're not building our own Moodle or Totara or anything like that, but we're using the foreign LMS.
Not foreign, We're going to partner with, so Moodle is open source, yeah. So we are doing a Moodle
foreign technology that we're using still. We haven't reached the stage of building our own Trini Moodle. No.
I don't know if you want to go there because you want our developers to, yes, build and create. But if that exists, to me, leverage that and add more value to it than redoing, you know, like recreating the wheel.
No, just checking.
So not to show, yeah. So if I understand
I was just checking on the terminology used in the state, because there is, there are a lot of local companies and organizations building our own versions of the Singapore technology that we used to just bring in and buy. Keith, you look like you have something to say.
Yes, Tracy brought up a great point there. That's a great way to kind of end off this forum. This, you know, we have teachers who created a lot of books in the past, you know, so we have a lot of book-based content out there and so forth. Now, I've been personally involved, and also I know several other teachers involved in several projects. You know, there's a great software out in many schools using it right now for I.C.T. You know, I've been involved in that. You know, we've been involved in a game-based learning project, you know, where it's, because personally, I don't really like the book idea. You know, I think that learning software should be fun, should be something like how you would see a student go and spend whole day on Genshin, on Fortnite, and, you know, they get their points, their badges, and whatever it is. You know, the learning software should involve all of that rather than just, you know, looking at a video. Unfortunately, most of the teachers out there are still creating video-based content, you know, which is great still. But, you know, we need to have more development on the side of more game-based, all-encompassing software where you could actually have achievements and so forth. So personally, I know companies doing it right now at their own level. At the ministry level, they tried it with the Moodle and so forth, but I think they're revamping it because a lot of teachers were asked to create content also for the new platform that's coming out. So we have it happening, you know, sporadically, kind of in little islands all over the place. But I think we need to have much more, you know.
Right. Dev, Shiva, who's next?
Yeah, sure. In terms of what's happening now, I like the fact that Andrea said, you know, if there's something out there, they're not looking to reinvent the wheel, right? And these resources that I spoke about for Cambridge, ironically, has been created by Caribbean authors, you know, Trinidad and St. Lucia, namely. And I know we are recognized as authors on a global basis. And we hope that, you know, we recognize that we do have good local talent here to do some of these things that we have. So as we said, we have that, look, I have the book right here, right? There's a whole series of books already created. I'm not selling the book, but the idea that there are resources out there that are already tailored for teaching the digital skills to our students and teachers that we could readily implement or to and bring it into our system. So,
Dev?
Okay, you know, I actually was looking at, you know, a comment that Talia made earlier in the chat, which is, you know, developing critical skills, critical thinking skills among our students. And I think that is necessary. I know Tracy asked the question, it's not what should be done, but what are we doing, you know? And I'm glad that Pandit brought up a book, you know, because the whole idea behind the ICT, and I think the real book, actually right now I'm working on a project with some other educators from different parts of the world, to actually have a truly interactive textbook, okay? It's online, it's not just a PDF with links and whatnot. It's video, it's truly interactive, and it will assess your ability to learn as you go along, and it will actually pace your learning based on how you are progressing with respect to the content that you are delivering. Based on the formative assessments, or the results of those formative assessments will determine how fast and how far you go, okay? And this is where I see the real ICT, future-proofing the ICT, developing that level of content where, you know, it actually promotes self-learning and self-development and that sort of stuff, you know. The problem with books is that once they are written, and no offense, Pandit, absolutely no offense at all, we all learn by books.
Oh, no, just to cut in there, it actually has that subscription with an online interactive element of it. Yeah, they included
wonderful.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful, right? So it's a book that grows, right? And the point I want to make is that, you know, once you see a copyright 2022, that's an old version. The ideas would have changed, you know, and this is why I try to, you know, get my students to start thinking along those lines. Yes, there is the book, but go to the internet, you know. So Tracy, I hope I answered your question. You know, we need to look at other ways of, you know, trying to get the student to think critically, our educators to develop content that will actually, you know, be really and truly future-proofed. It never gets old. It's like me, you know. I just wanted to end on that note, Jacqueline. A little joke for everybody.
So yeah, so every question was answered. So one of the things I think was I saw in Singapore is that they introduced the concept of model schools. I believe there's something similar in Trinidad. I'm not sure if, correct me if I'm wrong. And in those model schools, they actually were doing the new things. You know, so they picked the schools, whatever, you know, criteria they use, I don't know. And then I said, okay, in these schools, we're going to be doing this. And we're not going to be doing chalk and talk. We're going to be doing this, and not just students, but everybody from the administration, meaning ministry level, straight down into the school.
Yeah, so somewhat like a test school or model school. You go in, you put in all the things, you test them out, you get people accustomed to them, you figure out the way it works, and then you move back, and then you work on how do we implement this in the broader school curriculum, in the broader school ecosystem. Is that what you were meaning, Tracy?
Yeah, I think I got cut at it more.
You did.
Yes. I was saying, yeah, so whether or not the model school approach, we're actually going to do something, and I'm just back to the doing something approach. So is that something that we can do? Use the model school approach and say, okay, we can't do it, we can't boil the ocean and just run it through all schools now, obviously. But let's pick some of those schools, whether it be high performing, I don't know, whatever the criteria is, and let's try and deploy this new approach, a hybrid, whatever you want to call it, where we're doing digital skills development, content creation, experimenting with new things. And I know the talk is going to come back about the curriculum and CSEC, but surely there must be a way to be in between that CSEC CAPE discussion and doing something that is going to future-proof where we are. Otherwise, we are going to fall behind very rapidly.
Yeah, there's one thing. People have this idea that CSEC and CAPE are this exam that you must teach to in a particular way. If you know the material, you can go in and do the exam. And however you teach the material, you can teach the material with all the different tools that we're talking about. We don't have to lecture and teach the material and do hundreds of practice tests in order to pass a CAPE, in order to do a CAPE or CSEC exam. So the evaluation of the knowledge doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how we translate the knowledge. It doesn't matter how they learn the material. It doesn't matter how they learn the skills. It matters how much they learn and then it can be evaluated in any way. But I would like to say that we have gone, my Lord, 8 minutes over time. I am so sorry we're 8 minutes into people's lunch. It has been a really, really fascinating discussion. There have been some suggestions that we continue this type of discussion online, because that is one of the things about the IGF, that it's not a thing, it's a process. So we don't have to stop here today. We can continue this conversation online by various means, online, offline, however we choose to do it, until next year IGF event. But I would like to thank our panelists, Dr. Smith and Dr. Nurse, who came in remotely and for a short bit at the beginning, and Pandit Maharaj, Mr. Gosine, Andrea Kanneh, and all of you who sent in all these questions and made it so.
Keith Laban, the fair Keith Laban.
I called Keith second, didn't I? No, oh my God. No, I thought I saw Laban and said Nurse. I'm so sorry, Keith. Keith Laban, because I was looking at it and saying, I'm sure I left a name out. It felt too few. But yes, I am so sorry. And Keith Laban, both Keiths. So thank you ever so much. It's been a wonderful discussion. I hope you all thought it was too. And let me hand over to whoever's supposed to close us off and take us to lunch.